Hello and welcome. My name is Matthew Marquit and this is part 3 of the basic Unity level creation. In this particular video we're going to cover a couple things like saving your scene, importing assets into the scene, and working with prefabs. We don't cover as much this time as the other videos, so this one should go a little bit quickly. But let's start first by saving the scene. So of course, as we start creating content, we want to be able to save what we have. If we go up to the top and we hit File, now keep in mind there are multiple things that you can do. You can save projects and you can save scenes. Think of the project as the entire game, while the scene might be a particular level within that game. Okay, so in this case we want to save the level because this is the stuff that's going on here, right? So we're going to do save scene as, and we can call this basic level or basic underscore level. I don't like to do spaces in my naming conventions. And we'll just save it into the root folder of your assets and hit save. So we should now, if we go click on assets, you'll see basic level right here, and that's how you'll load it up. So when you load up Unity again, the next time, if there's nothing over here, if it's all blank, we'll just double click on this, and that will be how you will open your file. Now obviously also be sure to save often as you work to not lose any work if of course Unity crashes or something like that happens, your power goes out or whatever. Okay, so that's saving your scene or saving what you're working on. So let's talk about how we can import some assets. Now we created a folder over here before called scripts, okay, because there's some scripts on the shell that I want you to download. So download those in doc sharing, and I'm going to minimize this for a second. I actually have those scripts on my desktop, and I'm actually just going to drag them into this folder. Now yes, there are a couple different ways. Now you're going to get this. It's basically saying some stuff is outdated. Just hit I made a backup, go ahead, it's fine, right, and it'll update that stuff. Okay, now if we were to right click on the folder here and show and explore and click on scripts, we could have done the same thing. We could have dragged these into here, and then when we switched back into Unity, it would have loaded them. So there's multiple ways of bringing content in here, but these are those two scripts that we're going to use. Now the first script is the collectible master, okay, and the collectible master acts as the UI in order to count how many objects you have in the scene. I'm actually going to zoom in here a little bit so while we're working we can see what we're doing a little bit better. Okay, so first things first, we're going to add the collectible master. Now it's kind of hard to tell what they're saying over here. We can change the size of what's being shown by this little slider right here, so it could be larger and then we can read a little bit more on the line, or go all the way down and get just, in this case, because it's scripts, we don't really care what the thumbnail looks like, so this makes it even easier yet to read. So collectible object master. Now this just needs to be in the scene. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an empty file in here, so we'll right click and go create empty, and we can just call this particular one, we'll rename this one CM for collectible master, or collectible object master, and we can drag that onto the object. So now that we've dragged on the object, you actually look over here in the inspector, we see that we've got a script added to this. Now there are some things that you can change on this script. You can actually even change the name of it. So if I'm able to hit play right now, we can take a look at what happens. We'll see at the very top, and I'm going to hit escape for a second here so we can see, the very top says 0 collectible, right? And it's kind of a small font, and it is in black text. Now if I get out of this, okay, we can change this to say whatever we want. So we can call it pellets, right? And I'm gonna use some spheres, so I'm gonna call it pellets. You guys don't have to, but we'll just call it pellets. So now if I was to hit play, you'll see that it now says pellets at the top instead of collectibles. The other thing you can do is expand this, and we can do some things like change the colors and so on. If we go to normal, we can actually change the text color here. So if we were to say choose white or whatever, we can do that. Now if we want to see all this in real time, what I'm going to do here, I'll leave this by the default black, but we're going to hit play. And you can see in real time, right, if I don't have maximize on play. So let me escape that real quick, and we'll set this back to game, and we'll take off maximize on play. And then we'll hit play here. So that we can see that going on. We'll hit escape so we can move our mouse over here. And now I can update things in real time. See, I can change the color of the text or whatever and see what it looks like. Now, it won't save these things, but this way we can kind of tell if we like it a certain way. So like, oh, I like it red. Now, in this case, I don't suggest anything other than black or white. In this case, white is probably your best bet. Okay, and you can change the size of the font too. Now, 0 is not necessarily the actual size. If you actually start low, it won't be that big, but let's just say I choose like a font size of 30. You can see it's much larger there, and as we go on there, like if I was just to pick 1, it's like absolutely microscopic. So 0 is a default, but it doesn't mean that that's the actual size. 20 is actually a nice size. I find it's not overwhelmingly huge, but you can kind of put it in there. But those are just a couple of things. Now, sure, there's other stuff you can tweak and move around and change. I'm just going to leave everything else as is. So let's talk about then the collectible objects themselves, how to make them, and prefabs, which we'll talk about in a moment. So I'm going to get out of this here, and we can go back and change our collectible master really quickly to be white text, because like I said, once we got out of play, all the stuff reverted, and we'll change the size back to 20, right? So now if I hit play, it should be all of those things that we had before. So we'll escape, get out of play. All right, so in order to bring an object in, like I said, I'm calling them pellets because I intend on, I'm going to switch over to game view here because we can't rotate around or I should say scene view because we can't rotate around in game view. I'm going to come in here, game objects, I'm going to create a 3D object, and I'm going to pick a sphere, and in this case we will bring it up so we can actually see it up into the world here, bring it over here, and so on. Okay, and this will serve as our first collectible object. Now we can think about these as maybe like Pac-Man pellets or whatever, right? And so maybe if we go over here to materials, we can right click, create a new material, and we're going to pick maybe a bright yellowish color. So we'll pick something like this, go all the way in the bright realm. Okay, and remember, because our thumbnails have been dropped, we can increase this and we can change that so we can see it a little bit better. But I'll come here and drag on that new bright yellow material onto our Pac-Man pellet, right? So obviously it doesn't work just as is. We got to do a couple of things. So first things first, we need to actually put the script on, right? So we have our scripts over here. So we're going to click on our different scripts, and we'll see this first one here is a collectible object. Fairly simple. We can do a couple of things. We can drag this onto the object itself right here and add it there. We can drag this onto the sphere over here and add it that way, or we could actually on the object itself hit add component, come down to scripts or new scripts, right? So scripts are the folders, and you can see all the scripts that I have in our whole scene, including the collectible object and collectible object master, which could be added that way too. So actually a bunch of different ways of adding scripts to an object. If you add one by mistake and you don't want it, fairly simple to remove a script. You just click on the little gearbox over here and choose remove component, and it will get rid of it. So you can do that with any of the things that you don't want. Okay, so like I said, we want to put that script on there. So it should now be on the object. Very last thing we need to do, you can't forget to do this, otherwise it won't work, because the coding actually has to have the player tagged as a player. So our FPS control needs to be tagged as a player. If we take a look over here, it says tag, default set to untag. Let's set it to player, and now we should be good to go. As long as there's, of course, collision on that object, collision on the player, this should work. So we can come over here, take a look at where our little pellet is, walk over it. Boom, we picked it up, does not exist anymore, and you'll now see it says 1 pellet at the top. Now, what I want you guys to do is create a little kind of obstacle course with the ability to collect a total of 10 of these pellets that you're going to spread across the map. Now, instead of like saying maybe I like this and I duplicate it a couple of times, so I hit Control D and I duplicate it. Of course, we do want to name it over here. That's pretty helpful also. So if we right click and rename and we call it pellet, that would be a lot more helpful than just having it be called sphere. So we can call this pellet also, pellet 2, whatever. Right, so it's a couple of pellets. Now these will both work, but if I say I put in, 10, 20, 30 of these pellets, right, and if I'm making kind of a large game, if I was to say I don't like the scale of them, I think they're too big or they're too small, I can come in here with the scale tool and change it but unfortunately I'd have to go in and change it for every one of them, and that'd be really annoying. And that's where prefabs come into play, and that's why I created this prefab folder. So now that we've created one of these pellets and they're collectibles, I'll actually select the pellet 2 for a moment and delete it. We're going to select this one here. We're going to go over to our prefabs folder, and I'm going to right click and create prefab, and this stands for prefabrication, so that it's kind of already done. So we can just call this pellet also. So this will serve as our prefab, and we can drag the prefab in the hierarchy that we've already created that has what we want, the material, and also has the script, and we can drag it onto this object here, and now we have what is known as a prefab. So if I delete this out of the scene, this is saved within my file structure. It's not within the scene world, but it's saved here. Now if I am to drag this out into the scene instead, you'll notice one major difference, of course, with the last one. If we take a look over here in the hierarchy, it's now highlighted blue. So anything that is a prefab will be blue inside the hierarchy. Okay, so it's just a very faint kind of blue text. Now this object, and the reason why we want to do a prefab is now if I hit Control D and duplicate, right, and I maybe make a whole bunch of these, so I'll do a whole line of these like total Pac-Man going on here, right? So if I decide I want these to be just a little bit smaller, I can come in here and scale this, right? And now if I take a look over here at the top, we can do a revert, which will go back to its default, but I didn't want to do that, so we'll scale that back down, or hit apply. And when I hit apply, you'll see that every one of the other prefabs in the scene will match it. And that's why it's very important to work in prefabs, so that when you have things that are all over the map, you can do it that way. Now we can also Control D and make another copy of this and so on, right? And we can come in here and we can put another pellet up here, right? Maybe I can take this platform itself and Control D it, move it over, use the V key, snap it up, make it kind of like a little bit like a platform there. Make another one of these, Control D, move it out here or whatever, right? And so now the player is going to have to jump and try to get this. So we'll move it kind of a little bit further out. So if I was to come in here and play, so we'll go over here and play, right? I can now grab all of these. So we'll pick them up and you see the numbers kind of climbing. Those are all gone now. Whoop, of course. And yeah, that's pretty ridiculous. Of course, my settings for jump are ridiculous. I didn't change them from the last time, so this should be fairly easy. Jump and just kind of hold forward and see if I can land on this. Come on, skills. Yeah, there you go. So anyways, that's basically it. I just want you to kind of keep going and keep creating an entire little obstacle course out of this, kind of having 10 pellets to match the assignment for the first one. But anyways, this concludes the video series on the basic Unity level creation. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this and learned, and I'll see you in the next videos.